I believe. Go ahead and call this meeting to order. We thank all of you for being here, and hope you're as excited about some things as we are. We do have a quorum, so we can proceed. First, an invitation, if you could, Reverend Richardson.
That's great. Father, we thank you for another beautiful day you've given us. And we just pray that you be with us tonight as we make decisions for the district. Father, that as we do the business, that you guide us and direct us, that we make wise decisions for children and our staff and our community. We just thank you and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Okay, the pledge. Andy, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the first item is the approval of the March 25th financial work session minutes. You all had a chance to read those. Are there any corrections that you're aware of? If not, may I have a motion to approve?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Any adjustments or changes to the agenda?
No, sir, not this evening.
Good.
Dr. Lee?
Yes, sure.
I thought you were just asking for the March 4th regular meeting. There were some issues with the April 1st closed session minutes, which I guess will get to a closed session.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I would have raised it earlier, but I thought you just were talking about the March 4th.
Yeah, it may be that some of it's not ready
No, they were published. Yes, it was.
yet. Okay. Okay, I'm with you. All right, I'm with you.
Thank you. I
Okay.
just want to reserve the right.
Oh, sure, absolutely,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you.
So let me make sure I understand, Mr. Chair. So did we just approve all of the minutes? I, along with Mr. Rivers, I guess, heard you say the financial minutes for the financial work session.
Right.
That's just there's a very minor item, but the April 1st minutes, there was something in there that I need a little explanation on. It was a matter of a vote, and the numbers associated didn't balance out based on the members that were present, and I was just wondering how is it that the total votes with no abstentions would not equal the number of members
Okay.
who were present?
In the minutes.
You did just approve the open session minutes, and I think
Okay.
generally we do review the closed session minutes when we get to close.
Right.
Be fine.
We'll make sure not to do this.
Okay, great. Okay. So, did we vote on it? All right, we did the announcement of changes. You have a list of consent items. Recommended action is to approve the consent items. Are there any questions? May I have a motion to approve the consent items? We have a motion, and there's a second. Further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, they're approved. All right, recognition, student recognition.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, will you join me at the red carpet, please?
Oh, they gotta get out, yeah. Now we're gonna keep them all in. Make it stay here and try to keep them awake, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to announce the 2019 Battle of the Books winners from Tar River Elementary School. Gabriela Gomez. Benjamin Maloney. Chloe Lewis. Jamie Grimes. Joy Grimes. And the two sponsors, Shelby Ford and Lisa Slingerland. And now for our middle school champions, the 2019 Battle of the Book winners from Northern Granville Middle School. Alida Henderson. Ethan Adcock. Faith Hudgens.
Hold it up.
Vincent Pareso. Absent. Andrew Myrick. Jermaine Puryear. And Sierra Jones. Also accompanying these students, their sponsor, Miss Kathy Witt.
Sierra, hold it up. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure to introduce some adult recognitions this evening. First, I'm very proud to announce we have our 2019 Granville County Public Schools Teacher of the Year, Miss Jade Curran. For those of you who were not able to attend, we had a special ceremony last Thursday evening in which the announcement was made on stage and Ms. Curran was recognized in front of a packed house at South Granville High School auditorium. As the winner, she will go on to represent our district at the regional, state, and hopefully national levels. So we're going to see you go all the way this year. Congratulations. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce someone who has been instrumental in orchestrating all of the special events we have held this year. Would Miss Teresa McCullum please come forward? Ms. McCullum is the chorus teacher at South Granville High School, and she has been the behind-the-scenes master of ceremonies for all of these wonderful events. And we thank her for all of her hard work.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Finally, we are going to recognize an entire staff. The faculty at Granville Early College High School have been recognized by the U.S. News and World Report for one of the best high schools in America. Notice the buttons that the staff is proudly displaying.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Hey, look at that. Under your foot?
Yes, we have one more recognition, but I'm going to pull the podium up for this.
Okay, sounds good.
So, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we'd like to recognize two individuals that are part of an organization that has been instrumental in helping our school district. LRC Indoor Testing and Research has been monitoring and reporting on the air quality issues in our schools for the past 2 years plus. During this time, they've provided invaluable information to our school district. They've also recently assisted us with a new research project that will be studying the link to student health and student academic performances. We are very proud of all of the work that they have done with us. We're grateful for their contributions. And Mr. and Mrs. Tony and Kathy Richmond are here this evening, and we would like for our board chair to present this on behalf of the board as appreciation for all of your work.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Bullitt, if you would please just stay here for a moment.
Thank you very much. I just have a couple of comments to make. As she said, my name is Tony Richmond. It's been my pleasure to be working as an environmental consultant with the school district for almost 5 years now. I can't tell you how much we appreciate and how lucky you folks are to have the administration and staff you do here in Granville County. I've worked with school districts all over eastern North Carolina, and I can't think of a group of people who are more concerned about the education that their children are receiving and the conditions of the schools that they go to every day than the staff and the board here has in this district. The change in this district over the last 5 years that I've been privileged to witness has been monumental. We are grateful to this. We are recently, as Dr. Winborn alluded to, we have recently started a research project that's going to last 2 years in the schools. We're finishing up the pilot piece of that this year. Next year will be the full-blown study. This was made possible. We're doing this in partnership with Tulsa University. We're doing another school district in Boulder, Colorado, along with Granville County here in North Carolina. This is made possible by the manufacturers of Lysol cleaning products. They are funding this study, and I'm very grateful to them. In order to show our appreciation for the privilege of being able to work with this school district over the last several years, LRC is proud to present to the school district this check for $10,000 to help with literacy efforts in the school district.
Here, let's get a picture.
Kathy?
That's so hot.
So you guys stand right here across this way.
Do you come around front? Yeah, I'm going to take the picture this direction. All right, big smiles. Say no mold.
Definitely.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
All right. I think you made it out to G. Thomas Hula. Nobody even
Thank you, Michael.
So Dr. Winberg, they're going to Granville County is going to be a part of this study. In 2 minutes, can you tell us what the study is in terms of the schools?
Yes, sir. It's dealing with our elementary schools, and right now is the pilot. They're doing it with 4 of our elementary. 2 of the schools are control, meaning that we're not changing our cleaning practices. 2 schools, we are using Lysol cleaning products to clean the desk surfaces in classrooms in the school. They are doing testing of the surfaces in those classrooms and comparing them. Then they're going to look at aggregate data related to attendance and test score performance at the schools to see if there's a correlation between clean school, healthy students, and better academic outcomes.
That's interesting. You'll keep us posted.
Yeah, the initial data is already very interesting.
Huh. Well, thank you. Great, that's super. Okay, we'll move on. Public comment.
Dr. Winborn, no public comment this evening.
No, ma'am.
All right, then we'll go to the superintendent's report.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Board of Education, our community, well, those of you remaining, good evening, guests and friends. Before beginning, might we take a brief moment of silence to honor the victims of the senseless violence that occurred on the campus of UNC Charlotte last week. Thank you for that. We will continue everything we can to keep safety first in our district. And I thank Mr. Udy and our safety task force for all of the work we continue to do in that area. Since we last met in April, a great deal has occurred in our district, and tonight I'm proud to share just a few. I would like to begin by thanking our Board of Education on the successful completion of this year's budget proposal and submission to the County Commissioners for the 2019-20 school year. Thank you, and thank you. I was honored to attend the Mary Potter Heritage Day this past Friday, whereby our Mary Potter alumni exposed students to nice historical perspectives and days of old in fun, food, history lessons, and games. The students thoroughly enjoyed their Friday at Mary Potter. Our very first night of kindness was heartwarming and moving as students from every school in our district expressed sincere appreciation to individuals in our community for an array of kind acts. This event concluded our district's character efforts for the year and demonstrated that today's youth are in fact kind, gracious, appreciative, and grateful. Last Thursday night's Evening of Excellence was an incredible example of our district's motto in action. From our wonderful students who have obtained straight A's and perfect attendance achievements, to our amazing educators who have achieved status at both the local and the state levels, our signature event was noteworthy. Tonight, we salute all of our honorees, as well as every educator who played a role in preparing our young people. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our Granville County Public Schools principals, because we celebrated National Principal Appreciation Day last week and our Cafeteria Staff Day on this past Friday. Week before last, we honored our assistant principals. We know that their dedication and commitment in all groups remains priceless to who we are and what we stand for here in our district. Granville County Public Schools educators displayed an enormous amount of balance last Wednesday at the May 1st North Carolina Teacher Rally. From the educators who were able to attend the rally on our behalf, to the many educators who stayed back and made certain students did not lose a day of instruction, I am proud to announce that our GCPS faculty, staff, and district successfully balanced it all. These are just a few highlights, as GCPS has really been on the move this month. This week, we look forward to an incredible Teacher Appreciation Week. So if you get the opportunity to send a kind gesture or words of appreciation to an educator, please do so. I'm pleased to say just how much we value and appreciate all of our educators. We also invite everyone to join us this Thursday night for the big CTE celebration designed to honor our ACT Work Keys performers this year. It will be held at Northern Granville Middle School at 6 p.m. Now, before closing, I would like to thank the Granville Ed Foundation for this year's Pig in a Raffle event this past Friday. Your support of our schools is greatly appreciated. Dr. Houlihan and I both left with some fantastic gifts, and we thank the friends at the Granville Ed Foundation. We are in the final quarter of the school year, and testing begins very soon. Let's make it a strong ending to another fantastic year. And happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers in our GCPS family and community. This concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Okay, a report from board members. Mr. Judy?
Today I attended the safety committee meeting, and some of the things that they talked about was they're making plans for another training session to see what they'd like to do. But the biggest thing they talked about was more social workers. Talking about the kids, 136 referrals this year, and some of the things going on with them. So that was the biggest topic there, was for us to get more social workers. Then the other thing was Dr. Winmore is going to be putting together a committee to file for $500,000 grant. So I hope
That would be great.
we'll get that. And just for your knowledge, on the 8th, I'll be at Mount Energy to serve ice cream to the teachers.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That teacher appreciates it.
Teacher appreciation. We love to
Maybe.
have all of you select a school. Thank
March.
you.
I mean, maybe 8th.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody else?
Let me just mention that
Sure.
I had the opportunity to visit a new organization, new church in Creedmoor. It's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And they had an open house this week, and I was particularly interested and had an opportunity to ask a question about the numbers of students that might be homeschooled and those in public school. And I learned some valuable information that I will share with the superintendent. But what I would like the board to know is I indicated that we have Granville online. And for those students that are homeschooled, they might have interest in pursuing some work Granville online that they might not have access to otherwise.
Wonderful.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Terrific. Okay, anybody else? As was said, we both were at the Pig in a Poker, Pig in a Raffle, or whatever it was. And it was great, it really was. There's a new executive director who is terrific. There were some issues with the previous one in terms of some controversy and all that good stuff, but this young lady used to work at the orphanage, at the Masonic Home, and a good group finally turned out. I think they had 125, and it was a lot of fun. So we even had 3 commissioners there, if you can believe that, which was interesting. So anyway, just wanted to share that. And going back to the Night of Kindness, I don't know if any of you saw the letter to the editor in the local paper from Tony Kozart about the event, and it was really very special. I think he was really moved. Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, that's down the next one. Okay. I've been instructed to share with you what's going on in terms of memorializing the Joe Toller Oak Hill School and Mary Potter School. And Madam Superintendent, when we use the word memorialize, what does that particularly mean?
Absolutely. The community asked several times after the decision to consolidate and close were made, after those decisions were made, what the school system was going to do to preserve the memory of these 2 institutions. And so since that time, we were asked to reach out on behalf of the board to several places to try to help memorialize, make certain the memory remains alive.
Please do.
All right. We've reached out to the museum here in town, and they were more than thrilled more than excited to make certain they went to Joe Toller Oak Hill and could do whatever it was they'd like to do or what it is they do to make certain the memory remains alive. Without us knowing exactly what we're going to do with the building, we thought it was very nice that artifacts and pieces of the culture would be preserved somewhere. But we think that probably should be done with the Alumni Association. So we have shared with the principal that some of this is coming down the pipe and very possible, but we wanted to share here for everyone to know that the board has reached out in that manner. But the reception was incredible with the museum. We've also reached out, I don't know if you recall, a few Saturdays ago, there was a marker from the state of North Carolina, a NASA marker for J.F. Webb, put in front of Cradle Elementary. And that particular day, we reached out to see if they could help us make certain we marked those two sites. And so we've made contact with the folk in the North Carolina Resources and Environmental Department to make certain they'd be able to help us, and there was immediate interest. So we will get those wheels turning, get the ball rolling, but I certainly commend this board for interest in what can we do. You're responding to that interest.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is policy. I'll turn it over to you in terms of an accountability model.
Absolutely. This evening, Mr. Calvin Timberlake has been ill, so he is not with us, but we have Dr. Myrick and Beth Cook. You might recall at the beginning of this school year, you had to approve the accountability model for our Phoenix Academy, and the time has come again for next school year. So this isn't new, but we cannot proceed without board action. So Dr. Myrick, if you and Ms. Cook take it away.
Go ahead.
We go together.
Good evening, everyone. Each year, because Phoenix Academy is an alternative learning program, we have to choose an option for the board. And for the last 2 years, we've chosen an option. And tonight, we're going to present, you can go to the next slide, a couple of options for you to take a look at. Option A, which is alternative schools can participate in school performance grades as defined by General Statute 1 SC-. In other words, it's the same one that we use for middle school, elementary, and high schools.
So the S should be a 5.
That should be a 5, yes. The next option B, alternative schools can participate in alternative schools progress model, next slide, which include these components: 20% student persistence, 20% in school achievement, and 60% in growth. And then the 3 years of data will be used for calculating school achievement. And then, of course, the growth will be added to that option. Option B is the option that we have used for the last 2 years. And if you will go to the next slide. And then there is option C, the alternative school may propose its own alternative accountability model for approval by the State Board of Education. Next slide.
So those are the 3 options.
Those are the 3 options. So Ms. Cook, Mr. Timberlake, and I feel that option B will be the best option for the district at this time, because it will give us that 3rd year of data that we would need in order to calculate the school's achievement.
Okay, any questions? And this is what we're doing currently?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, sir, Mr. Mims?
With the access to that 3rd year of data, where do you see the next step? In other words, next year this time, would you see it might be appropriate to look at another option or to continue on?
I think we would continue to have the student scores count for Phoenix. If not B, then the scores for those students would go back to their base school. They would be taught by students that are at one school, but their performance scores would go back to a base school that they're no longer a part of. So I think we would stick with B, where they're present and where they're invested and the teachers are teaching them.
And because this group of students are so transient in that they're in and out, and some of the students during first semester may only come and stay half a semester depending on what their infraction is, and they try to do, assess the students and try to get them back, because we want the students to be back with their regular peers as much as
As
possible.
soon as possible.
But with this model, it measures the school based on what it does with the students when they have at the school.
Yes, sir.
The 20% for achievement, currently the state for traditional schools,
Mhm.
if I'm not mistaken, is what, 80%?
It's an 80-20 model. They do 80
So you've inverted
performance and
that.
20 growth, and this is different. Because alternative school students are there an abbreviated amount of time depending on their fraction. It's not a full school year.
So you don't have any concerns that putting achievement so low that, I mean, we're trying to make
The
Phoenix
state
Academy.
did this model. This isn't us creating that. I didn't know if you thought that we made it.
I understand it, but I'm
Okay.
just concerned if you personally,
Mhm.
as the director of testing and, you know.
I
you're
like
not
a
talking
high
about-
growth number. I like a high growth. I like to see that students sit in that classroom and they learn so much from that teacher that they go from point A to point B and those scale score points increase. I think we should have a higher growth. No, I don't think 20% for achievement's great. I mean, it should be higher, but it wasn't my choice. But I'm happy about the 60% growth.
Might I add, when the state went to this, initially it was 60-40. Because if you look at that student persistence component, one of the things students who attend alternative schools run the risk of is dropping out. So the schools in in alternative schools across the state are also charged with being held accountable for keeping students in school, whether they stay with them or not. They are to go somewhere, and they want them to be held accountable for that. So that's sort of where the split came with student achievement and student persistence. They don't want youngsters to drop out. So that 40 is now 20, 20, and 60, with growth being the heavy.
And student persistence before was not one of the categories
Right.
that was listed.
That's me.
And I'm just concerned if, I mean,
What
level
gives you
one's level
stress?
one, and if we're not challenging ourselves to move students into level 3 and above, and it sounds like that the school would not, if all the students, and we do know that at Phoenix Academy, there are unfortunately a large percentage in level 1. So what's our motivation as far as to try to get that school, to get students out of level 1 into level 3, to at least grade level proficiency? If we don't use achievement as 20% is virtually nothing. I guess I'm concerned about
I don't think that number and this model, I think the teachers that are there are going to push those kids and work hard with them every day that they've got them. I just think this is an accountability expectation. I believe the teachers that are there working with them are pushing them to achieve higher. And they can get more out of them because it's a smaller number and it's more face-to-face if their attitude's right. Because, they've gotten in trouble and that's why they're there.
Sure, understand.
And over the course of 3 years, the students who are there may change throughout that 3-year period.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's another
Right.
another component that goes into that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Udy?
Actually, the growth is what is a more accurate picture
Yes.
of what that child has done. Because my wife is a teacher, and she said teaching 4th grade, she would have them come in on 2nd grade level. And by the time they left, they had gained 2 years and were ready for the 5th grade. So the growth shows more accurate picture than testing on the percentage. And I think that's why we like this one more, is the growth is there. It shows
If
what
you
the
don't
child
show
actually
growth,
did.
the more often you show growth, the more consistent growth, then eventually you will get to proficiency,
That's right.
is our mindset.
The one concern I have in our district is that if we look at our proficiency at grade level 3, 4, 5,
Mhm.
and we look at our proficiency at grade 12, 10, 11, 9, 10, 11, 12, I'm not seeing the growth. So we can talk about growth all we want, but if we still have, an insufficient number of students countywide in the college and career ready levels, 4 and 5, then all the growth in the world over 12 years has not resulted in where we want them. I mean, our goal should be, we're all college and career ready.
Agreed.
So I guess the thing about the growth issue concerns me in that in life, you take a test for an employment, for a job, you either pass the test or you don't. You can take it 5 years in a row, and you may grow every year, but if you don't pass it, you will not get the job. So performance is what the world runs on. That's the only thing, just in general, you've heard me say this before, is my concern that we put too much emphasis on growth when growth is not leading us to where we want to be, which is college and career ready over the course of 12 years. So I'm not seeing where the increase in growth is resulting in the people who are graduating being where we want to be.
And I think that's a legitimate point. And although we would disagree with growth and whatever, but we've had those conversations. But how is it that we continue to grow, but when they get into high school, some of the lowest end of course grades we have are in biology and English 2 or whatever it is. So how do we have that? At what point does that growth, which is to me very, very appropriate, reach the point that those kids are somewhere besides their scores of where they were in 3rd grade? Does that make sense?
And that's my concern. I mean, we're not seeing that in their performance in high school.
As they go through the system, by the time they got to a certain point. But anyway,
It's time for them to catch up.
the growth is, and Mr. Udy, I agree with you, growth is key as long as it leads to the appropriate place it should be. All right, we need a motion.
Discussion for another day.
That's enough of that, that took 5 minutes. All right, do we have a motion to approve this accountability model? We have a motion and a second. We have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay.
Our next item this evening, Board Policy 4353.
Yes, Dr. McLean, this policy defines reassignment in the policy. If you will scroll down, so it's shown in 2 places. This is the first spot here. Thank you. Disciplinary reassignment. As an alternative to long-term suspension, the principal may recommend and the superintendent or designee may impose a disciplinary reassignment to a full-time educational program that meets the academic requirements of the standard course of study established by the State Board of Education and that provides students with the opportunity to make timely progress toward graduation and grade promotion. A disciplinary reassignment to an alternative learning program or alternative school that meets these criteria will not be reflected as a long-term suspension in the student's official records. And if you continue to scroll near the bottom, there's another.
And board members, this is something that I suggested adding. That language comes directly from state statute as it was updated in 2011, and it is an option that your district has been using, as have most, for a long time, but your policies had not caught up.
And also a part of this is a student or his or her parent may appeal a disciplinary reassignment to the alternative learning program. The student or parent must appeal to the board in writing within 3 days of receiving the superintendent's decision. The superintendent shall inform the board chairperson of the request for an appeal and shall arrange in a timely manner a hearing before the board. The student will be assigned to the alternative learning program pending resolution of the appeal. The hearing will be conducted pursuant to board policy 2500, hearings before the board. The board will endeavor to provide the student and parent and to the superintendent written notice of its decision not more than 30 calendar days after receiving the appeal.
Okay? So this is basically an update of what's, okay, all right. And this is information, is that correct?
That's it.
Yes, I mean first read.
First read.
Information, and then we won't vote tonight.
Mr. Chair, Dr.
Yes.
Can we vote to waive the second read?
I believe we can.
Okay.
All right. Two-thirds vote.
Make a motion that we waive our second read.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that's unanimous. Okay. Now to approve the policy, that would be appropriate. We have a motion, do we have a second? We have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We move on, thank you.
Thank you, John. Yes. Attorney Jubison will review the past board member terminal.
So, board members, I sent you some information about my communications with the Department of Justice, and I don't really have anything to add to that other than to answer any questions and also revisit the topic of approaching your legislators. The original idea was that board members would do that, and just wanted to let you know that you can go forth and do that, or decide how you're going to handle that at this point.
What do other school systems do to take something to the legislature? I mean, is there anything formal that we have to give them, or anything of any nature of that?
No, I mean, we can draft, we can do a draft bill. What I would, I suppose, recommend is that you designate someone to have the discussion with your legislators and then offer, would they like a draft bill? Just, and to find out if there's any objection that we don't know about. And then if they would like a draft bill and you would like me to do that, I'd be happy to do that.
One of them would actually have to sponsor it.
Somebody's got to get it introduced, right? And what I think we would need to do, because the federal government is moving so slowly, is go ahead and draft a bill, and we've done this before, that says this, assuming it passes, that this law will not take effect until court approval. So, you know, we just sort of do it in the opposite order, but make it contingent on court approval.
And do we need a unanimous support by our delegation in the House and the Senate?
I don't know. That's probably a better question for them.
Okay, all right, I think we do.
Okay.
During my campaign last year, I ran into Representative Yarbrough at some type of function, and I broached this subject because it was something that I planned to be interested in when I got on board. He said he'd be more than happy to offer this legislation. So I think at the very least we have one of our delegation who seems to be on board. I can't imagine anyone. If the board, votes in favor of it, I can't imagine our legislators, since, was it all but 3 districts or 4-year terms, is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I
I
think,
think
yeah.
it would be a no-brainer.
Good. All right. So,
So what information do the board need to approve in order for this to happen?
right.
I mean, we have to have some understanding as to how it's going to change whatever.
Right, so we haven't actually we don't have a written plan of, how, and there are a couple different ways it would go. I will say that from my conversations with the Department of Justice, they are going to look askance at cutting short anyone's term or doing it in any way that would somehow be unfair to minority representation, which I don't think, which that is just something we need to watch out for. But, so, as far as what is our plan, I guess I always felt like we needed some feedback from the legislators on that drafting, because they and their staff are the ones who are experts on that.
And if they are going to look at minority representation, of course, I got 6 years there.
Yeah.
6 years, I just
Right.
thought about it. So I would assume that my say in this battle would have some weight. I just want.
It seems to me that Mr. Manis, you go first. Go ahead.
Okay, Attorney Peterson, I'm looking at the email, and I was under the understanding that board members might be receiving an inquiry from the Department of Justice.
So,
Is that still going to take place? It
did you
hasn't
receive a
happened.
message? And did you?
I haven't.
Okay, so the attorney called the numbers that are listed for you on the Board of Education website and said she left messages just for Mr. Mims and Mr. Peace, but that she didn't know if they were correct. So obviously neither of those got to you. So she would like to talk to you.
I mean, Ms. Pettaway can get a hold of me when she wants to, so.
I don't know what numbers are listed on the website,
Okay.
but, so in any case, I will give you her number. And I have the number that Ms. Pittaway gave me a couple days ago, so that is who she wants to talk to.
Back up just a minute. It seems to me that before we go to the legislators, that we need to have something that we've approved. Because it could very well be that we may not be able to get support for something from the board, because some may be from here, in terms of the nuts and bolts. And so I think that that's just an idea.
I think it's an excellent idea. I think we need to know where the board sits right now before we spend any more time on this. I mean, could it be in form of a motion that we proceed to, with all possible speed and effort, to change our terms to 4-year terms? And if the board passes that, then we can feel safe proceeding down the DOJ route and the legislative route without then saying, oops, sorry, we don't have a majority after all. I mean, I think that's a good idea.
But what I was also getting into was that if we're going to develop staggered seats to connect with what the commissioner seats are, or anything of that nature, I think we need to talk that through as a board and make a decision before we go any further, because once again, we can vote to support it, but we haven't voted to support the nuts and bolts. And I feel that if we're going to go to the legislators and probably have a joint meeting of our delegation, we need to have our act together about what we've approved, because we're not going to get in front of them as a group very often. And so that's where I'm coming from. Not only approve it, but approve what we're going to do.
Ms. Jewison put out an email in February where she suggested a way to stagger our terms. We all received that email. I think that may be a good start. I'm certainly willing to cut short my term to make this happen, because I think it's important for the community that we get to 4-year terms. Other board members may not agree, but anyway, I agree with you. I think that, and I think Ms. Lewis's email is probably a good place to start. That seemed like a logical way to do it.
Okay, so some of us may not remember that.
So I did, and I'll resend it, but
Some of us.
I made a suggestion for a way to do it that would not require cutting anyone short, but that districts 1, 3, 4, and 7 would automatically be in alignment if you let the current terms expire and then the next term was 4 years. Districts 2, 5, and 6, if you let the current terms expire in 2026, oh, I'm sorry, those are re-elected in 2020, let them be 6 years to 2026, then start 4 years, then they would be aligned with the commissioners. You kind of have to look at it to see how it all, but it's because it would be easy to do if you didn't care about aligning with the commissioners, but because you're not aligned with them right now, it's a little more complicated if you want, which makes sense, the district to be electing both at the same time. So that was the way that I sought to do it without anybody's being cut short. And I do recognize, you know, you're interested, well, you would be willing to volunteer, but I'm not sure that that gets you what you need. And I have some question about that just because the voters thought they were voting for 6 years, you know, so I don't think that's a total, but I have some just theoretical questions about cutting that short. I suppose the legislature can do it if they want to. But in any case, if you, it's 2, 5, and 6 that don't line up if you just switch to 4-year terms, and one way to do it would be to have one more 6-year term and then switch to 4-year.
That'd take forever. Okay.
We won't be with you, Elaine.
Yeah. All right, so,
So the other way to do it would be to have 2, 5, and 6 serve out their current terms, then elect someone in each of those seats for 2 years, and then go to 4 years.
so
So then you'd be fully aligned in 2024.
we need to have a meeting, and we need to discuss this paper in front of us and that kind of thing. At least that's what I feel. How does the board feel about that?
Could we decide tonight whether we think it's important to align with the county commissioners or not?
Yeah, sure can, that's great.
What is the value of that?
It was suggested, I think by Mr. Mims, I suppose it, am I wrong?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't recall.
I think Dr. Houlihan suggested.
Okay, maybe
Yeah, and we
so.
had talked about that too.
It may be a more efficient use from the, I don't know if your Board of Elections would find it more efficient to only, or that it would increase turnout if people only had to show up once instead of every other year. But I don't know.
Obviously, we do, yes.
I do have another question based on the timing of this, and I'm not sure if it has any implications or not, but we'll be coming up on another census. And with the census, there is the potential to do some redistricting.
That's true.
And particularly, if you said 2, 5, and 6, in the southeastern portion of the county. I'm not sure how that might come into play, but at least it should be addressed as part of this process.
So maybe, I mean, do you want to identify 1 or 2 board members? It seems like there might need to be some discussion with the local Board of Elections and others.
Get more information. Do we?
I don't know.
Well, but I'm going to go back to Mr. Rivers. Do we want to vote tonight to support the concept of 4-year terms? Is that basically what you're?
I think that's just probably a good starting point. If we had that support in February, but it'd be nice to know now so Ms. Dugas can march ahead and
Okay.
obviously this is going to take money to do this. And
Would you like to make that in the form of a motion?
I have a question for you.
Sure.
For me, it just seemed like enough information to make that decision, because I think people need to have some idea about what it means in terms of to individuals before we let it happen.
Okay.
Personally, I mean, I have 6 years debt and 4. I mean, it's not concerned that you go to 4 years, it's just how does it affect everybody? Because my getting 4 might cause somebody else to get 6 or 2, depending on how we proceed.
And I don't think the court would allow that, would it, in his case?
To cut his term short?
Yeah.
I don't know, but it certainly could be a problem.
Yeah, okay, anyway. Okay, so you're indicating that you would like to see
How
we do this.
we do the 4 year, if we want to look at it from the perspective of how it's going to affect individual board members, 7 board members.
It's not a question of being against 4 years.
No,
It's
that's
how
not.
it works out. Yes, sir.
And I guess I would like for the board to make a decision. Is this a majority or is this unanimous? Exactly what is the approval process associated with this?
It would be a simple majority, would it not, like any other motion?
Yes, as far as the board, you know, as far as being able to move forward, yes.
But it would not necessarily be unanimous.
No, you don't need unanimity to go. Now, your legislators and potentially your Department of Justice are gonna ask more questions if it's not unanimous. But the board acts as a body by majority.
So, other comments?
I have a question. It has to do with the school association. We have a couple of lobbyists that works for the school system. Would they, by some means, be able to do campus on this? I mean, in terms of talking to legislators, in terms of writing a bill, that kind of thing?
I doubt it, but it never hurts to ask. You've been paying dues for a long time.
Okay, so to go back now to where I think we are, please correct me, that one possibility would be a motion to support the notion of 4-year terms. Other comments related to not going with that until we saw the details. Does anybody have any other comments related to the two ideas and where we are?
You know, Tom, we could go with depending on the details.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think that, what we're trying to do right now is just make sure the board still is generally in favor of this. Clearly, if DOJ comes back with some, you know,
I would refrain to
crazy
say
thing that we
want-
have to do, or if the legislators want some kind of, you know, we could certainly then say, no, we don't want to do that, I would think. I mean, I think we would want to be comfortable with whatever plan, and the plan would be either Ms. Rubensen's idea where we put this way out in the future, or we also need to decide whether we think there's a value to align with the commissioners. If we don't align with the commissioners, we can get the 4-year terms much more quickly. And there's other complications. We could have some elections be 2-year elections and then go to 4. So I guess there's a lot of different permutations, but I think before we invest any more capital, I think it might just be nice to know that we are still in favor of this.
But I'm in favor of looking at fine print, what are the details.
Well, do we need to vote? Does anybody here have a major objection to the concept of moving towards 4-year terms, but not voting until we see the details?
I have no objections. I would just like to have a clear understanding of the process. What's the next step? What are we waiting for?
Oh, I agree, yes,
Okay.
and we need to talk about that tonight. Does anybody have a major objection? Then let's move forward, as we said, assuming it will be a vote at the appropriate time. It seems to me that the next step, well, you tell us what you think the next steps
Well, there's at least three things that need to happen. I will give different phone numbers to Ms. Ryan so she can talk to the board members that she wants to talk to. And continue, I mean, you've already voted to authorize me to, as far as moving towards just changing the court order. I mean, you can always take that back, but I feel comfortable at this point. I don't need any more from you on that. But what our discussion was that when it comes to approaching legislators and talking to them, that board members would do that. And that makes sense. Legislators have no interest in me, but you are their constituents. And you could certainly, let me look at this memo to make sure, but I think, yes, you could certainly share with them the memo. I did not draft it as a confidential document that outlines the different options and, the research that I did.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, may I suggest that we invite our legislators to a meeting and let them hear from us and question them directly, as opposed to catching as catch can.
Could you, if you wanted to go in that direction, could you use that help out there?
Sure thing.
Shall we look at that next? Would that be a good step? I think one important step is that we have the details of what we're going to be talking about in terms of lining up these seats or whatever, because we really do need to make sure that we can work out the details as a board. And if anybody disagrees, please say so. Or anybody have any other suggestions besides Mr. Mims' suggestion? Yes.
Could we perhaps vote tonight, or at least have guidance as to whether or not we want to align with the county commissioners? I think if we don't want to align with the county commissioners as a board, if we agree as far as our elections, if we, as they are now, they're not necessarily aligned. If we agree with that, it makes the plan much more simple and much more quick to accomplish. If we, and I'm not saying value or not value, I'm just saying as a board, what is our collective feeling on this? If you want to align our elections with county commissioners' elections, then I think we're almost going to be forced to follow Ms. Dugason's plan. Otherwise, someone's going to have to cut their term short. And I believe she is saying that she's not certain that that would be approved, even though I know that maybe some of us who would volunteer to do that and would run another election if we had to make this happen. So I think that's maybe that starts getting us paring down the details, which way we're going to go. If we really want to be, as a board, want to align with county commissioners, I think Ms. Dugason has probably the way forward.
Comments?
And if you don't want to align with the county commissioners, then you just need to go from, right now, you are elected in 3 groups and you need to go to 2 groups. So one district would need to elect someone to a 2-year term in 2020 and then vote again in 2022. And then you would have 2 groups instead of 3. And I've even seen it done in legislation that they have a random draw to see who that would be, or you can agree as to who it would be.
And Ms. Dukes, you're saying that even if I, for instance, would volunteer to give up 2 years of my term or 4 years and run again,
I mean,
you say that even though I volunteer, you're thinking that would not?
Well, I think, I shouldn't say it wouldn't fly. I think because the legislature can enact that. I mean, your legislator would have to approve of that and put that in their bill. The only reason it gave me pause is just because technically, sort of philosophically, they're not really your years, you know?
No, I understand. You made a good point.
But I think if when there were mergers and so forth, that did happen. Terms were cut short by the merger bills in order to merge different school boards. And so I don't think it's impossible. If your legislators were fine with it, if your constituents didn't have a problem with it.
Okay.
Can I?
Yeah, jump in.
Can somebody give me a minute Cliff Note version of why we're doing this? I mean, I'm not opposed to it, I just don't get what it gets the district. And what is this going to benefit the school system for? And I'm just asking because I don't
No,
understand.
There's 115 school districts in the state of North Carolina, 112 have 4-year terms. What I observed in talking to people during my campaign, and what I observed while having children in the school system, was that with 6-year terms, it's a long time if you get a board member who maybe is maybe not doing what the constituency of the district likes. That's a long time that district has to deal with that board member. Governor terms are 4 years, president's 4 years, Congress 2, and the Senate 6. So I mean, 4 years seems to be, commissioners are 4 years, city commissioners are 4 years. 4 years seems to be sort of the agreed upon idea. I also personally believe, in having talked to people who I was going to hope would run, a number of people I spoke with were daunted by the 6-year commitment. They say, it may not be that I don't want to do 6 years, but I hate to commit to that and then So I think the 4 years, I think 2 years may be a little on the short side. 6 years seems to me to be too long. So I think there's several reasons. One, we may get more people and more younger people with children in the school system, which I think would be an advantage to run if we were 4 years. And it puts us in alignment with how the rest of the state, for the most part, is doing business. So that's why I think it's important. I think if you, in Granville County also, most incumbents win. So, you know, all you have to do is win 2 elections and you're on the school board for 12 years. I think it'd be nice to have more of a turnover on the board with more younger people with children in the school system. That's just my thought. And I say that being 67 years old and just having won an election. But that's what I think it would do. I think it would open it up to more people, especially younger people.
Yes, go ahead.
You certainly may speak.
Thank you. And I agree with some of what Bob is saying, but in my time around, you know, I've been doing this for a while, and I don't ever remember until Mr. Rivers started talking about shortening terms. Anybody around this table ever saying anything about it, or was concerned about it, or even asked about, you know, the length of time. So for 30 years, well, not for 30, for at least 29 years, nobody had a concern about it. You know, and in my case, you know, I think in my course, I can remember my term and the commissioner in my district times being elected at the same time. And I don't remember that being different from when I ran, you know, without the commissioner being there, you know, on the same ticket. You know, while I don't see a real difference between 4 and 6 year terms, when you say everybody else is doing, my response to that is so what?
Okay, well, so, I'm feeling that we don't have a consensus. Am I wrong?
A consensus to move forward with looking at 4 years? I mean, I thought we were trying to gather information.
All right, let's make it clear. Do you want to make a motion?
Well, I was going to make a motion. I thought the most recent motion would be, do we want to, as a board, align with commissioners, or do we not consider that important?
Okay,
And
will you make that as a motion?
I move that we do not align with commissioners, that we move on a more expeditious path to go to 4-year terms.
Okay, is there a second? Good, second, Mr. Mims, any further discussion?
I thought some of the argument was that we would save the election board money by lining up with that election. Would that not happen if this is what we go with?
I think we have to ask them. It's a little outside my area.
It would all, if we don't line up with the commissioners, the way it is, and that's the way it is now. And so there are additional elections as a result of it.
I should clarify, what I was asked to look at as far as aligning with commissioners was that the same district vote for their commissioner and board member. So I think you would still have elections on the same date, but it might be that you're electing the District 2 board and the District 4 commissioner, and then next time, yeah.
So the motions basically do things as we do now. We have elections that sometimes align and sometimes don't align. And I'm not saying I'm one way or the other. I'm saying I made the motion, we either voted up, which means we don't care, or we voted down, which means we do care, and then Ms. Dugas's plan is probably the way forward.
All
So,
right, now repeat what you just said.
yeah, I'm making a motion that we disregard aligning our terms with the county commissioners, and we move on a more expeditious path to go to 4-year terms.
Okay, so the vote would be not to align. Anybody else? All those in favor of Mr. Rivers' motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So, 3-3.
So motion fails, and we then are gonna now align with the county commissioners.
That's correct. That's what we voted on.
No, that wasn't part of the motion. It didn't say if it fails, that we will
You're right.
ride with the commissioners.
Second
Did
motion.
not, the motion was, that was not the motion.
So we need
Second.
another motion.
To save time, I move that we so structure our 4-year terms that we align with the county commissioners.
Let's see a show of hands. All those in favor of the motion?
Need a second?
We need a second. I thought Mr. All right, we need a second. Two motions, sorry about
I second the first
We
one.
have
I
a
was
second.
second this one as well.
that. I'm sorry, so we now
Let's vote.
repeat the motion.
I move
No, wait, Ms. Bedwell.
Motion to move that we align with the county commissioners.
Okay. Is that it? All right, that's it. Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor, say, raise your hand. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand. All those opposed? 3-3. All right, nothing passing. Okay.
Good progress.
Further comments on this item?
I make a motion to table it until we get a new board.
Okay, we have a motion to table until we get another board member. We have a second.
Question,
Yes, sir?
how can we table this if we've already voted?
Well, you haven't, what you voted was for the attorney to pursue changing your court order to remove reference to term limits, thus leaving it open. You have not proceeded with the second step of getting a local bill passed. My thought would be that we at least finish the process of getting an opinion from the Department of Justice, and then, which you can then do with what you please, just because if we have to stop now and start over again whenever, it'll be a whole new person. And so I suppose what you're looking at, I'm just thinking about how to structure that. So if, I guess it depends on what you want to do. If you'd like me to finish out what you told me to do, then, but not move on with the next step, then I think Mr. Peace's motion is appropriate. If you would like to put a hold on the whole thing, I suppose it's a motion to amend the board's prior action.
We just voted down. We had two motions that didn't pass.
I would like to change my vote on the last motion, change it to an affirmative.
I'd like to go to the next item.
I don't think you can, there would have to be a new motion, I would think, too.
Someone who, let me think this through. I'm gonna have to look that up, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm trying to think through who can make the motion again.
Okay, let me go back to one thing that Mr. Udy just said. Did we approve a plan or not? Because what we hadn't voted. I mean, to me, the motion to table and respond is legit, because we haven't done anything like decide whether or not to support the commissioners, whether or not to go to what kind of staggered terms. So we really haven't approved something at this point that would keep our tabling would allow that to happen. Does that make sense?
In essence,
Yes,
Mr. Chair, I guess, but we have not authorized anything to go forward.
Right, right.
A motion to reconsider, but it has to be made by someone who voted prevailing side, which was no.
That there was no prevailing side, it was 3-3.
The motion failed, so the noes prevailed technically.
I move to reconsider.
Okay, we have motion to
Well,
reconsider.
I have a question.
which vote did you prevail on?
Well, I was on the motion failed, and I voted against the motion. And I'm now reconsidering the motion, and I'm going to vote in favor of the motion.
The
Point of
mo-
order, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
sir, yes, sir.
How could there be a prevailing side
If it's
if
tied,
it was 3-3?
that's what I would think. Is it your thing?
Because-
Please define that.
Well, I've just explained, because if it's 3-3, the motion fails, so those who voted against it were on the prevailing side.
So I move that we align our terms with the county commissioners.
All right, is there a second? Is there a second?
Wait a minute, Mr. Rivers. You are the one who made the motion last time to structure 4-year terms to align with the commissioners.
Correct.
You made a motion and then you voted against your own motion?
Well, I was just trying to make the motions to save time, to put the motions on the
Right.
floor so we could decide. But, you know, we need to move forward in some way or another. I will change my opinion, which was non-alignment, to alignment for the sake of keeping this moving.
Okay. Do we have a second?
But can we do that having made the motion?
Can't talk, we, you know, there's a motion, and either we get a second or
This
not.
is
and then-
unreadiness. He made the motion.
Okay.
He has to support the motion that he made. Now, he can't come back and unring the bell, having made the motion. If somebody else had made the motion, then he could have done that. Go to Robert's Rules of Order. Thank you,
Trying
Mr.
to find it. But when I read through this, I thought I had read that the person that made the motion could not remake a motion unless you have a new member come on board or 6 months.
Okay.
I can't find it, but when I read this book, I remember that.
Okay, so that does make some sense. Mr. Mims, the person who made a motion can vote against it, but they can't, this sounds a little silly, they can't argue against it, but they can vote against it. Because sometimes people will change their minds after they make a motion, once they hear the arguments.
Then unreadiness, then you need to show me that.
Well, but,
I need to see that in Robert's Rules. That's all I'm asking.
So the motion at this point does not have a second. I'm going to make a chair's ruling that we can put it, table it until further time. We have a motion to that from Mr. Peace. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second from Mr. Udy. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
No.
It is tabled on a 3-2 vote, 4-2 vote. All right, all those in favor of the motion to table, please raise your hand. All of those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, all right, the motion passes. We're going to move on.
okay, I'm sorry, I do need some clarity about, can I finish up with the Department of Justice? Not filing a lawsuit, but, or do I need to stop talking?
And Mr. Chair, and that's why I voted against it, because I'm not sure what guidance we just gave the attorney based on the motion to table. So what do we just tell the attorney to do?
And
Would it not go back to our previous direction for her, and she was working with the Department
So
of Justice?
I guess here's what I take away, and stop me if this is wrong, is we'll find out what their position is, but I won't actually file anything without coming back to you. So And you have, I mean, I know you were concerned about those, you have not expended much money on this at this point.
Let me read what we did, just as one clarification. The Board of Education and Board Attorney discussed information that was pertinent to the board members' terms of office. Mr. Rivers made a motion to authorize the board attorney to seek amendment of the 1989 court order to remove restrictions on term length with the condition that the attorney seeks further instructions if it will exceed $5,000. Mr. Udy seconded the motion and it passed 5-2. So,
And my motion doesn't stop her from doing what the board is.
Okay.
all right.
But you know, what I'm confused is, you asked if there were any objections, and no board members objected to the policy of moving forward. So I think if no board members objected, we need to be able to move forward somehow. So,
But I think the discussion was the length of terms. And please, anybody jump in if I'm wrong. The discussion was the length of terms and connecting it to, or not connecting it, and we broke into a tie, so we didn't approve anything. So what I think we tabled was, until we have the details to look at, we're not going to move forward.
Mr. Peace's motion was to table the issue until a new board member joins.
I think that could be a long time. That's where I'm kind of going with this. I think what Mr. Peace originally said was that he was looking for more details. I don't think that should preclude us from moving forward and approaching the Board of Elections, approaching the legislators, waiting for the DOJ, but being ready at that point then to actually have the vote that we have been kind of reluctant to have, and that is whether we align or not align. I think if we table it now, then there's no chance of getting it for the next election cycle. So now we've pushed it 2 years down the road to 2022. I think there's some urgency if we're going to try to get it to the legislators by June, so we have a chance to have it go into effect for the 2020 election. If we table it now and wait for the new board member who's not coming on until July, then we're going to miss the legislative session this time. So that's going to put us now to the soonest that we could have this in effect is 2022. And if we follow this due business plan, now we're looking at 2030 to make this thing finally happen. So I think the question again is important, is does this board support this or not? If the board supports it, then I think we need to move on it. If the board doesn't support it, then we do nothing. But I think I heard unanimity that we wanted to go to 4-year terms. So I think if we don't do something now, we're going to miss this opportunity, and we've now pushed it 2 years further down the road.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
we have voted to table this matter, so I would suggest we move on.
We haven't voted yet to table. Oh, we did? Sorry.
Ms. Davis.
all right, we're going to move on, and maybe we can, I'm going to move on. The next item on the agenda is the farmer's market lease.
Ms. Day and Attorney Gibson, will you share with the board, please?
Yes, Ms. Janice Daniel, representing the farmer's market, came to see me, up to the central office prior to the April meeting, but it was before the agenda, after the agenda had already been set for the April meeting, and wanted to renew the lease with the farmer's market. And you have in your materials a copy of the prior lease. I went back and did some research, and so this lease, the prior lease was a 5-year lease, and it was $1 a year. And I went back and did some research, and I did find a lease dated back in the 80s with the farmer's market. So I know it's back, it has a history of that long. You also have a copy of the property, the map of the Mary Potter property, which designates this particular property, because the board does own property on both sides of Lanier Street. So and then sent that to Attorney Dubison, and she's included the process that would need to be taken to renew that lease.
Right, so we are not asking you to, I put a new 5-year lease on there if that is what the board wants to do. We cannot approve that tonight because statute requires that you advertise that you're going to lease, if you're gonna lease board property longer than 12 months. I've advised the superintendent, under your policy and under the law, she has the authority to do a lease with someone of less than a year. So she can, if, you know, she can do an interim lease with the farmer's market if you decide you want to, while we publish notice that we want to, that we're gonna do a new lease, and then approve it after 30 days. I did look at this property because there had been some discussion about why we own this. The board does not use this property. It is part of the Mary Potter parcel though, across the street from Mary Potter. The part of the old Mary Potter gym you have already given to the Mary Potter Alumni Association, so you don't own that gym anymore. But this is the property next to the gym where the farmer's market happens, and it goes back a little bit. So if the board would like to renew the lease is terminable. If you decide at some point you want to sell the property or do something else with it, you can cancel the lease on 30 days' notice.
So what do we need to vote on tonight?
If you are interested in renewing the lease, you would vote to authorize us to advertise that we're gonna do that, and then we'll bring the actual lease back for approval. We have to advertise for 30 days to the public that we're gonna lease board property. I know that the superintendent would like some okay from you that you're okay with her doing a short-term interim lease in the meantime, so.
Do we have a motion? I want to get something on the table if we could. Do we have a motion to do what Ms. Dubison first? Do we have a motion? Is there a second? We have a second. Discussion. Oh, I'm sorry. You're moving quicker than I realized. All right. Yes, Mr. Mims.
If there is an upset bid, or if there is someone else that comes in and decides that they might like to lease that, does it automatically default to?
No, this is not like a sale. If someone, what the motion is to advertise to the public that you intend to lease. And the advertisement, I think I included it, says the board intends to lease to the farmer's market for $1 a year. If somebody comes in and says, no, I want to rent it for $200 a year, then at our next meeting, you would decide, well, do we want to go ahead with the farmer's market, or do we want to do this other person? If we want to do the other person, then we have to tell the public, well, now we're going to lease it for $200 a year, 30 days. Then.
Okay. All right, so that makes sense.
Yes.
So we will go in, we will take care of an interim lease for 30 days while we advertise.
Okay. We need to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
All righty. We're now at vacant Board of Education position announcement update. Ms. Bedway.
Just wanted to inform you all that we have one person that has submitted a letter of interest for the District 1 vacancy.
Okay.
When is the deadline? Or has it passed?
Make it this
May 15th.
Okay. All right, next is policy 4327, drug prevention, first read.
Yes. Mr. Rivers, will you serve the team?
Can you bring it up on the board, please? Yes, sir. We discussed this last meeting in April. You all were given hard copies of it and have had a chance to look at it. I guess at this point, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them, or Dr. Wimborne.
Any questions? Once again, this is first read, so anybody have any questions in the interim, we'll go from there. But right now, it's up there. There have been no negative comments at this point in time.
I'd like to make a motion that we waive the second.
All right, we have a motion to waive the second.
I'll second that.
There's a second, Mr. Mims. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much. Policy passes.
Now to approve the policy
Would
meeting.
you like to make it, since this was your baby, you want to make it?
I move that we approve the policy. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you,
Okay,
Chief.
very good. Financial update and board travel.
Board members, you have financial update as of March 31st, 2019. At that point, we're 75% through this fiscal year. Our expenditures are within budget and our percentages are in line. The other piece that you have is the board travel, and this is as of March 31st, 2019 as well. And this might look very familiar because we did not spend any money in the month of March. So it's the same report as you got in the report as of February, the end of February. So the 18-19 budget for board travel is $10,624. Expenditures as of March 31st, $6,420.61. The remaining balance of $4,203.39.
Okay, thank you. Surplus declarations of property. Ms. Judison?
Yes, I have brought for you resolutions for the disposal of two surplus properties, the annex and the property at Crescent Drive. We'll talk about the annex first. You got the appraisal, which came in at $270, is that right, Stan?
Yes.
And it is my understanding from the superintendent that she has spoken to the county manager and that he is speaking to the commissioners tonight about making an offer. So we don't have an offer from them yet, but they are discussing it.
Question.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
That's an appraisal, is that, do we have any idea of the fair market?
Well, I don't know a way to determine that other than an appraisal.
So we're saying that the property is only worth $270?
That's what the appraisal came back
Yeah.
at.
Based on comparable properties in the area and what they've sold for.
Comparable to what? It's
That's the problem with getting an appraisal. I mean, getting anything, because there's no
comparable
comps.
to, you don't have any other type property of that nature in the area.
Well, I
So-
mean, you can see the ones that he chose.
Right there in the,
That's in the report.
the analysis is there.
I mean, appraisals are imperfect, but if there are no comparables, then I don't know of a better way to come up with a value.
Okay,
He compared it to 5 properties in Oxford, and he lists them that sold in the last 2 years.
so regardless of the price, Mr. Phelps is talking to the commissioners tonight.
Yes, sir.
And if they're interested, they would make an offer.
Yes, so the board asked me, or I was asked to come back with what you would need to approve to move forward. So what I have here is a resolution that accomplishes all these steps at once. It declares the property surplus, it directs the superintendent to offer it to the commissioners. If the commissioners do not want it, then it directs the superintendent, step 2, to sell it, as provided by statute. If you get an offer from the commissioners, the way the statute says is the commissioners must pay fair market value or a price to be negotiated between the two boards. So I would have preferred that you had an offer already, but they weren't ready, so.
So if we don't go with the 270, how in the world do we decide what a different amount would be in terms of fair market?
Well, I think you receive the offer and then decide if it's, you know, if it is worthwhile, I mean, because the risk you always take is if you reject an offer, you take the risk that you're not gonna get others when you advertise it. So,
Well, let's see what, you know, I suggest we wait and see what comes in, and then as a board, we can decide whether or not we think that's even in the ballpark. Yes?
I just need to understand the process. I thought this was being offered to the county commissioners tonight. So if they come back and if they offer 270, is it fait accompli? Or
No.
does the board get a chance to say, we'll take the 270?
you
Or
can
what?
direct the superintendent tonight to, that 270 is fair market value, and if they offer that, go forth. Or you can say, we want any, whatever transaction it is to come back to us.
That step one in the statute says, commissioners at a fair market value or at a price to be negotiated between the two boards.
Okay, so we get a chance.
We get a
Another
chance.
bite at the apple.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right, moving along.
So if you want to move forth tonight, you can approve that resolution for the annex. Do you want to vote on that first, or do you want me to also tell you about Crescent Drive?
Let's vote on this first. And would you, once again, for Ms. Bailey, do you need that motion again?
Well, no resolution. Yeah, I mean, nobody's made it yet.
Oh, yeah, but I'm just getting to make sure what it is. We need to make sure, given the conversation, that we're all on the same page. All right, so do I have a motion to approve the resolution as presented? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Okay.
Okay, Crescent Drive, we did look into the deeds and other documentation for this property and have attached some of it here. I also sent this in an email to board members. It essentially, I think you're all familiar with the property. It's adjoining the ball fields at South Granville High School. There's a small house on it. There was some question about whether the board inherited it, but the board actually bought it in 2011, did I say? When the board, and the emails, there are some emails in the file that show that there had been discussion about wanting more property for South Granville, whether it was for parking or ball fields expansion, I don't know. They didn't record that in the minutes or anywhere, but it was an intentional purchase by the board that wanted that property. And you purchased it for about $57,000.
We actually spoke with an employee here in the central office whose grandmother called, made an offer, made it available, and the school system intentionally made this purchase. Now, there were no plans after that, after the purchase was made. No one can find record of the plans on what to do, and so everything has remained as is since that time. And that came after the Evening of Excellence. We got that historical piece.
So still has a house on it. Obviously, I don't think anybody's been inside, but whenever the last appraisal was, the appraiser noted that it was termite damaged and the floor was sagging. I suspect that house is a tear down, but I obviously haven't been in it.
I was in it about 3 years ago.
Okay, so the question is, its appraised value is $57,000 and change. Given that the board intentionally purchased, that's the tax value, but that includes about 35 for the land and the rest was for the structure. So I don't know what you would actually get for that residential lot, but I guess the question is it worth more to the Board of Education to keep it for potential South Granville use, or is it clear at this point that we don't want it?
What if we tore down the house?
Right. Well, I assume that was the plan.
Who knows what to do with it?
So, yes, I mean, it would be, I guess the question is, do you see a day when you might want some more parking or other land on South Granville and wish you still had that land? Did the principal have any thoughts about what?
That's who I got this from. Well, the principal didn't know, but one of our employees here was helping break things down, and her grandmother lives next door. And she says, oh, I remember when that happened, and gave us the information.
All right, so what's the pleasure of the board?
Dr. Lynn,
Yes.
question. Do we know what this costs us per year to just keep, I mean, I assume we're not paying taxes on it since we're, do we have to pay mowing costs, or is there any cost to us?
Yeah, we are paying to have it mowed. I think it's nominal.
It's not very big.
No.
So, what's the pleasure of the board?
What can it be used for? I vaguely remember talking about parking or something when it was purchased, but there wasn't much.
What is that building? Is that a building outside the outfield, or is that a parking lot?
This,
Yeah.
that's the stands and the press
Oh,
box.
that's the bleachers, so it's right behind the bleachers.
It's right there.
We need to decide what we want to do, if anything.
Is there, Dr. Wimmer, was there some use you have for it as far as our facilities man?
Parking, I know that you can see off here in the corner, this is the edge of the track. So for those of you that aren't familiar with South Granville, it's their track and their soccer field is sort of just detached. And so if you were to go one more parcel of land north here, there's an entrance, a driveway to parking back here for the track. And that is, when they have track meets or big soccer games, there's nowhere to park. They end up parking all along this road. So I think parking, could definitely be used.
It's going to be handy at graduation.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe some type of storage building. I don't know. That's something for athletics.
Okay, so unless there's, so the feeling at this point is to keep it. If we want to get rid of it, somebody needs to make a motion to that effect. Mr. Min?
Well, my motion, I'd like to make a motion, but it's not to that effect. I would like to explore the cost of demolition and the cost of converting into parking.
Okay.
It'll be somewhere between 3 and 5, and your asbestos report's gonna be between 500 and 1,000,
Okay,
depending on how many samples they have to take.
all right. If anybody would know, you would.
Yeah, I do.
Do we know how much it would cost to make that into a parking lot? I mean, we're looking at $300,000 to $400,000 for.
That's what he just put on the floor.
Yeah,
It's just
that's what I just put on.
demolition and conversion to a parking lot.
Gravel parking lot would be, pretty quick.
Okay, is that your motion, Mr. Min?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? On we go. Southern Area Schools Facility Review, Expert Consultation.
So, Mr. Chairman, there are two documents on this. The first is a, click on that one, yes, thank you. This, at our last work session, there was some question about, where are we, what are we doing, what's going on? So I took this document that was first presented in the middle of March, and I have revised it. Yeah, it's not, when you do full page, it's difficult to zoom into. There you go. You have seen a version of this document before. I've essentially updated it. So this was first presented to you in March, and so it includes all of the previous steps or action items. So Ms. Day, if you can scroll down, these are all the things that we have done to date. And then, so right here, step action item 5. There was some discussion at the last meeting about Joe Toller Oak Hill campus. Determine the future use of this facility. So at the April meeting, you directed me to move forward with the appraisal. That's been done. I've contracted with a company, and we should have that report, if everything goes well, by the end of this month. So hopefully at the June meeting, I can bring to you an appraisal for that property. So then step action item 6, that was to determine the fair market value of the annex building. And so you directed me to get that appraisal, and it was delivered on 5/1. So, and you have it tonight, okay? The next one is the declaration of surplus property, and at the April meeting, you directed the board attorney to begin the process of doing that, and she brought that tonight. Also, to investigate what was going on with that residential property at Crescent Drive, check, we've done that tonight. So if you continue on. For the southern area schools, determine the reorganization of one or more schools in the southern Granville County. Back in August, as we all know, there was that vote, that 7-0 vote, to conduct a formal study of Hawley, Mount Energy, and Tar River to look at the best viable option for the reassignment of students to maximize efficiency. And that was based on a recommendation that was in the IPSAC study. So that's where that came from, that motion came from. In March, you discussed this previous action, and you even voted to rescind it, but that did not pass. And then you actually added to the scope of those studies to consider 3 possible scenarios. Okay, so I'm just walking you down memory lane here, right? The first one was close Hawley and convert a southern area elementary school to a middle school. Okay, we would then sell the Hawley campus. And the elementary kids that are displaced would be spread out amongst the neighboring schools. Okay, that was the first one. The second one was we keep Hawley, we renovate it, right? And then we also close a southern elementary school. And then you reassign those kids to neighboring schools. The third option that you brought was to close a southern area elementary school, close Hawley, and then convert an existing high school to a middle school, right? You consolidate to 2 high schools. You take one of them, you make it a middle school. That way you're able to close Hawley and you close an elementary school. Okay, so then you'd be basically disposing of 2 properties. All right, so if you'll scroll down for me, Ms. Day. At that time, you directed me to not proceed with any architects, but rather to identify an outside expert who could provide us some high-level guidance about the viability of these options. And so, with the help of Rod Malone at Tharrington Smith, I got the name of someone who, by all accounts, is very much an expert in this area. And so there's a separate document that I have that explains his initial analysis and take on this. So his name is Al Rader, and he is a retired industrial engineer. He worked for Duke Power, or CP&L, I think before that, nuclear power plants. He then worked for Wake County for almost 10 years on their major maintenance and facility construction. He was responsible for helping build many schools and renovate schools. He's also worked for SAS, so he has a very impressive CV. So this is input from him. And yes, it's a very high-level analysis, right? This is not getting too much in the weeds, but I provided him with our capacity data, our maintenance costs. He asked for the physical characteristics of the schools, their age, geographic location, all that stuff. I gave him a copy of the IPSAC study and the master facility plan. So you get the idea. He had a lot of data to work with. And then he also went with me and we did a physical inspection of each of the southern area schools, and not including the Butner schools. Okay. We also did not visit any Granville Central High School. So really just the Creedmoor East. Okay. So I showed him the 3 scenarios that the board was considering, and then he said, well, instead of me going through each of those, let me assess each of the grade span schools separately and let the board hear that input, and then they can take it for what it's worth, because he felt like it wasn't his place to weigh in on the scenarios as much it was the viability of each of the schools. So if you scroll to the next page, Beth. So when it came to high schools, he felt that the closure of one high school and any recombination of the remaining two would set the capacity at those two schools at or near maximum levels. Okay, they would not quite be at the absolute capacity, but they would be full. You know, and you can see there that all three schools serve about 21, a little more than 2,100 students. So the recombination would result in 90% plus and leave very little room for any future potential growth that might come. So the implication there being that you may need to build a high school before too long if you closed one and you moved everybody into two. Also, you know, he talked about his experience in Wake County, having to close a high school. He had been involved in that. He says it's very, very difficult. He says, but that's for y'all to decide. That he doesn't, you know, it's just tough. As far as middle schools, if Hawley were to be closed, then an elementary would need to be converted, right? Because we don't have the capacity. You can't just move everybody to Butner Middle. So you've got to have another middle school facility, right? There's three options, right, that he looked at. The first was Creedmoor, and that's something the board had not talked about. But he immediately saw this as a very strong candidate because the athletic fields exist already just through the woods there at South Granville. And there are many schools that have adjoining campuses throughout the state, a middle and a high school, and they share facilities. So in essence, we would not have to build any athletic facilities, right? If you move Hawley to Creedmoor and convert it to a middle school, you don't have to build anything else. You know, you just need to renovate the building, but you don't have to put in ball fields and so on and so forth. Of course, you got to gut the interior. There's a lot of work that would need to be done there with that. But also, if you moved Hawley to Creedmoor, the Hawley facility is the old Hawley facility is only a mile away, right? So, like, assuming it was used somehow for the community or that sort of thing, that football field and soccer field are still there. So if you had to, you didn't have enough room for the high school and middle schools to play games on the same night, it's not far for them to go to the old Hawley to play. Okay, so Mount Energy, very large campus. It does have suitable land in the rear of the school for athletic fields and a gym to be constructed. The topography is such that it would work well, okay? You got to do the same type of interior renovations, but the big thing that Al pointed out to me is, like, you know, this is one of your premier elementary schools. This is one of the best ones that you have. You know, why would you want to go and tear that apart and turn it into a middle school? And then if you scroll down this day, Tar River, he saw some concerns with the land there. We did not go back into the woods, but he looked at the GIS maps and everything, and he thinks that there's some potential wetlands issues. So large athletic fields may be problematic there. Not sure. Definitely a lot of earth moving because that land drops off dramatically out the back there. But the plus is, of course, it's already got a gym, right? So you wouldn't need to do anything there. And again, he said, but why would you do this? That is your nicest elementary school. It's beautiful. It's set. Okay. When it came to Hawley and the renovation, he said, look, you're going to have to demolish that main building and the middle building where the old cafeteria was. And you're better off just rebuilding that part of the school. You could keep the gym, you could keep the media center, but you would need to just rebuild the main body of the school. Renovating it would be more expensive than rebuilding it. And if you wanted to try to keep the school open while you did that, there are mobile unit companies that can bring literally a whole mobile school in for a year or 2 years, however long we were able to do it. And they could bring in we could house the kids on the campus while they rebuild the main part of the school. But it's going to be very expensive, very expensive. So then he just looked at elementary schools on their own merit. And of course, the potential closure of Wilton would be his preferred choice Just from the facility and geographic standpoint, it's the oldest campus, with the exception of the main part of Creedmoor. The main building of Creedmoor is older, but the other two main buildings at Creedmoor are newer than Wilton. Plus, we've just invested $2 million in upgrades to Creedmoor. Wilton has the lowest capacity, so it's displacing the fewest number of students, and it also has the smallest campus. If you were to close just Wilton, that would help preserve some of your long-term elementary school capacity. We're thinking about growth 10, 15 years down the road. And if you just scroll down to additional notes.
Wait a minute, what is CES?
Sorry, that's the Creedmoor Elementary School of the Arts. That's another candidate, but again, I think I just said, we put a lot of money in there. It's a city school too, that's another issue. If you were just to close Creedmoor and just try to sell it, I don't know, that's just, something to think about. We've just put a lot of money in that building. Additional notes, he said, the board definitely needs to consider these 3 bullet points. A new elementary school costs about $25 million. New high schools, that's something you don't want to have to build unless you can absolutely avoid it. Because, conservative cost is 60. That's low. So you can build almost 3 elementary schools for the price of the high school. So again, he attempted to provide a lot of information without making too many judgments that are subjective in nature.
Well, the hardest thing about going anywhere from here with this is cost.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing how much it would cost to do X.
Correct.
Or do Y. How can we get that information in a fairly quickly, or can we?
By hiring an architecture company. And I know that that's something that the board had trouble with when it
We
first
sure did. Don't you hire them again.
Well, and actually, he spoke very highly of that company. That Wake County.
Well, then I don't believe this now.
Yeah.
Forget that.
So, but I mean, honestly, that's where the figures would come
This
from.
is you sort of wanted us to get as much, understand to get as much information without a huge expenditure, and that's Al. So this was we don't want to hire an architect level of consulting.
Ms. Phipps?
I just have one question for Dr. Winborn. When I looked at not this document, there were 2 documents there.
Yes, sir.
It talked about it said in the second paragraph, it talked about, this is a high-level analysis based on review of public data, including but not limited to capacity data, maintenance costs, facility characteristics, the geographical location, information also reviewed from the IPSAC study, and it goes on.
Mm-hmm.
My question to you is, are his findings consistent with the IPSAC study? Because I don't recall a 90% capacity being reflected in the IPSAC study. I thought IPSAC was far less than that in the out years. So my question to you is, are his findings consistent with the IPSAC study?
When IPSAC was done, we hadn't talked about closing a high school. So that was never on the radar until it was made kind of in December.
So the IPSAC study, when they presented, they were very clear that they did not look at the condition of buildings, right? They did not look at the condition of any of the facilities. It was merely based on a projection of capacity, future growth, and infrastructure in the county that would support, where the people are going to be in 10 years.
Yeah, but I'm not concerned about infrastructure. I'm concerned about capacity. I'm concerned about the numbers of students.
Right.
If the numbers of students are not there, we're not worried about being near 90% capacity.
So-
I pulled up the IPSAC study, they did not, I think they were not asked to look at closing a high school, and they didn't look at it. And that's where the 90% comes from, is specifically, if you were to close a high school, then you would be at 90% of your high school capacity.
Just high school only.
90%, what do you mean, 90% of students?
Meaning that if you closed the high school, you would then be using 90% of your remaining seats.
In the other two high schools.
The other two high schools would be at.
They would be
about
90%.
90.
How can you say that when your capacity would have to be based on the numbers of students? And if the numbers of students are decreasing, how do you get to that number?
I think he's taking your current capacity and your,
But this is not current. We're talking a 10-year projection.
I don't know.
Was that not what the IPSAC study was about? If that's incorrect, let me know.
Currently, there's 2,150 students, and if you divide that into two high schools, you got 9%.
But
I mean, that's what it's saying.
We're not gonna have 250 next year.
That's my point.
Well, we're talking about
At the
currently.
rate that
That
we're
doesn't mean
losing.
next year, that means
It's
now.
currently, that's correct.
Well, but we're not closing the two schools, a school next year. So as we go in the out years, those numbers of students are going to decrease.
Well, okay, what would be the next step? Does anybody feel that it would be necessary to get some budget figures about the cost? You know, we talk about renovating or not renovating hallway. What does that mean? If it's $20 million or it's 15 million or whatever, I mean, somehow to me, we need that information if we're going to convert to Creedmoor. What does that mean? If we're going to close a school and move those kids around, what are the percents? If we're going to redo Tar River or we redo Mount Energy, what's the cost? I mean, I've heard people say, well, it's going to cost all this big amount of money because you have to take out the toilets and so on and so on and so on. What is the figure? Because until we have to me, until we get the financial information, even if we want to do something, we may not be able to afford it. And to be able to look at some of these other options, I want to know how much it's going to cost to convert Tar River. I mean, would like to find that information. That's just me and one thing. So, Mr. Mims.
My concern, board members and Dr. Houlihan, is how much money do we need? How much are we looking for? Because that will tell us the magnitude of what we need to do. Right now, we're talking about the cost, but we have no idea how much money we need. So what if it costs $1 million or $10 million? How much do we need in order for the superintendent to carry out the programs to make this that highly competitive school district?
I'm not sure I understand in relation to the monies to.
Well, we talk, as this year, we're talking about $1 million that we're asking the county commissioners for tonight. If we want to do an IB, we need more monies and so forth, based on the projection, the strategic projection of what programs are going to be in our school district. What are we going to need? It's almost like future maintenance costs for property. How much are we going to need next year? Or, to put it another way, to what extent are we going to have to go into fund balance 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now? That will give me some sense of how much money we need and how much property we might have to divest.
Yes.
I think from what this study has shown, or what our expert has shown, I personally believe that the Tar River Mount Energy options are not viable.
Okay.
And I think that was what came through loud and clear. You have two of our best schools, brand newest schools just about, other than Central, that are tailor-made elementary schools that we would have to modify severely. So I think it's an intriguing option he brought out, converting Creedmoor. I think that was something that we had not thought of. I think Wilton is, the arguments for disposing of Wilton and the potential income we could get from that sale are important. So I think also what Mr. Mims said, I think our projections would indicate that we are not going to be at 90% capacity by 2 years from now when this would go into effect. And therefore, the high school option, high school closure option is an option. Bottom line is, we're going to have to close at least 2 more schools minimum. We're losing, according to the lab report, and I believe that, we're losing almost $2 million a year due to heating empty classrooms. We can't sustain that. We have to do something. My suggestion would be that we put our effort in no longer put our effort in Tar River and Mount Energy, if that's the board's desire. But we look at the cost to renovate Hawley. I think that's probably going to be prohibitive, but I think that's probably something that needs to be looked at. I think we need to look at the cost of converting Creedmoor. And we look at the potential gain if we dispose of Wilton. I think, and we have to look at the other option, which is moving a middle school into South Granville or Central and closing a high school. So it seems to me we can narrow our focus a little bit, and if we have to hire architects, then we can save a little bit of money on not studying all those options.
Okay, any comments to that?
I agree.
You agree with him?
Yes.
Okay,
We need to just take Tar River and Mount Energy
off the
off
table.
the table and look at the other schools.
When you say look at the other schools, what he was saying,
Yes.
including the high schools?
Yes.
Okay?
Because we won't know to either rule it out until we see it.
Trying to move this along, what about doing a motion first to eliminate the Tar River and the Mount Energy original discussion?
That's the question.
Yeah.
Would that have to be rescinded as opposed?
I'm looking back to see what the original motion was. It was number 3?
Well, I was just, these are the 3 scenarios that are topics of study as of right now. The way I understood it, those are the 3 things that the board, remember you took and you added to the September one, so there are now 3 choices up there.
Okay.
So perhaps you could modify that to, like you said, narrow it down?
Yeah, a motion to amend your prior action to remove Tar River and Mount Energy from consideration.
But I thought we had a vote on that, and that was defeated, according to the comments. Didn't anybody else hear that?
A vote on.
There was a vote to remove Tar River and Mount Energy from this study or from this analysis, and that was defeated.
Pending what we just heard from Dr. Winberg, it was pending getting some more guidance, which we have received tonight.
Okay.
That's correct.
So then, if that was pending, so what is the motion now, Mr. Chief?
The suggested motion, or the suggested information, because it's your motion, to remove Tar River and Mount Energy for consideration for renovation as a middle school. Okay, have we got that, Ms. Bedouin? Okay, would you reread that motion one more time? That proposed motion.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion, do we have a second? We have a second, Roger. All right, now if you would would you read that motion?
A motion to remove Tar River Elementary and Mount Energy Elementary for consideration as a middle school.
Okay, there it is. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion is unanimous. All right. So do you want to make a motion to the effect about Creedmoor Elementary and Hawley?
Well, I think what appears to me where we are right now is trying to decide whether we're going to get the financial information. And Dr. Winberg is saying we need to hire an architectural study. Did I understand you correctly? So I think what we would need to do, Dr. Julian, would be give guidance to Dr. Winborn as to what we want to do. Do we want to look at the study of renovating Hawley? Do we want to look at the study of closing Hawley completely and closing one of the high schools and converting it to a middle school. That would be one option. Another option might be converting Creedmoor into a middle school. If we convert Creedmoor, then do we need to close another elementary school in the south?
Well, let's just take it one
Right, so I'm just
step.
trying to get what study do you want to authorize?
So, one possibility would be a motion, if we needed, to get cost figures to renovate Holly.
That's all
Correct.
I made that.
You made it when?
Motion to renovate. They could get a price on renovating.
Right from the very beginning.
On renovating Holly.
So,
As opposed to, well, see, that's what we're talking about, the elementary school too. But that's, we've done away with the 2 elementary schools. But the motion I made to, cost to renovate Holly was in the original motion that was made.
okay, was it a part of, was there an additional part of that motion? Or was it straight up that motion?
It had a big part
It's
about
number 2 on the board.
renovate Holly.
Okay,
So that passed.
Yeah.
right.
So we're studying it. So I suppose Stan has been under the guidance that you didn't want him to spend a lot of money to do that. So I think that's, and to hire an architect, you would do a request for qualifications as you did before.
So we don't need, we can go ahead with that and get information or financial possibilities for Holly
To
because.
redirect him to do that because we told him to stop.
Right.
Right.
That's what we need. This is on the floor, but we paused it when we said not to get the architects, because that's what's needed now in order to make that happen.
Well, if we're gonna make a multi-millionaire, $1 million decision, we have to spend the money to get the information. There's just no way around it. I mean, I don't see,
I'm happy to go with a different architect if you like. We weren't happy with that first round. They were one of 3.
are we not happy with it?
We're still not happy.
We're still not happy, is right.
They were one of 3 that we looked at.
Well, and give them marching orders to be realistic. The guy before threw everything in the kitchen sink in there. I mean,
Well, if you recall though, the problem was the original cost was $80-some thousand, and we said that that was too much money. So they reduced their fee, but they told us that the cost estimates were going to be less accurate. So that's why they had all that contingency and stuff in there, because they didn't spend the same amount of time analyzing it. So I'm just saying that it's not,
okay. Well, the bottom line is, do we redirect the administration?
I'm sorry, we're about to lose one.
Never to be seen again. All right, we're in rough territory this time. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
When you talk about renovating a school, and when we talk about Holly, and there were certain areas of that school that didn't need to be done anything to, cafeteria, media center. So, I mean, to have an architect or engineer go in and do the entire building, I mean, we don't need to do that, do we? I mean, can't you look at what's gonna cost to renovate what needs to be done and not? Media centers, that's fine. I mean, because there's one section of that building that you could tear out and not affect these other areas that we're talking about.
Makes sense.
Yes, sir, absolutely right.
So what you're saying is that you could do what Mr. Peace is suggesting that might save us some money.
Yes.
Okay? All right, so we are,
May I ask for a clarification, because I did hear Mr. Rivers kind of going through the list that
Right.
I was following. And when I look up here at these 3, I'm a little confused how to move forward. So, Mr. Rivers, you said renovate Holly,
Right, and that's number 2.
Number 2, so keep that. Then the other option is close Hawley, and there's 2 choices for that. You either move the kids to a high school, or you move them to Creedmoor, is what I heard you
Right,
say.
and moving to Creedmoor is the new option.
Okay, so maybe 1 becomes close GC Hawley and convert Creedmoor Elementary School to middle. Does that make sense? So instead of saying southern area, you want me to focus on Creedmoor.
That was just a suggestion, whatever the board's pleasure, but
Could I get some?
All right, do we have a motion to that effect to get it on the table?
I make a motion.
All right, we have a motion, is there a second?
You need to state the motion.
Yeah, please state your motion.
The motion be that we authorize Dr. Winman to conduct an architectural study to determine the feasibility of converting Creedmoor Elementary into a middle school and shutting down GC Hall.
Okay, that's the motion, is there a second?
And part of that motion should be, we'd have to consider the use of the Hawley athletic fields, so that might determine how we would sell the remaining property.
Okay. We do not have a second. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All right, further discussion? All those in favor of that motion?
I do have a question. I understand that there are long-term maintenance costs associated with Hawley. And I see and concur with the need to move forward with this. What I am uncomfortable with at this juncture is I'm not sure how much money we're trying to amass or what we're trying to accumulate. How many dollars?
We don't know until we get the figure.
No. It's not about how much what the cost is to renovate. How many dollars do we need to operate the school system in the out years?
The superintendent's original request this year was 3.3 million is what we were originally going to take to the commission.
So is that what, and I'll take that, is that what we're looking to accumulate by doing, closing schools and renovating, coming up with $3.3 million?
I think the assumption is safe today. The problem is, as you project out for 10 years, that assumption changes. There's fluctuation. And you don't know which way it will go because there's also this element of the chicken and the egg. Will the children come when things are here, or will they not? Or do we just bank on them leaving and we don't try to put things here? So there's some elements in the room I think we've got to grapple with in order for us to put our thinking in the right place on this. When we talk about the difference between our northern area schools and southern area schools, let's not forget the projection of communities, the homes, the houses that are coming up in the southern end. I think that's another piece. And they aren't here today, but will they be in 10 years? And the answer we've at least gotten thus far is yes. So you all have about 3 unknowns, in addition to what you do know, that you've got to make some decisions around if we're going to get the ball rolling.
Well, I would broaden it out even further than that. Are we looking to amass enough funds, not only to change the organization footprint in the southern part, but will there be any implications on the northern part of the county where we will need funds to address either maintenance or upgrades or things of that nature?
I venture to think you will, Mr. Mims, and that's a good point for this board not to forget, because if we do nothing, these buildings, I mean, I don't have very many nice buildings like we've seen in this report. They're right. Tar River and Mount Energy are really up there with my new ones. All of the others on this end of town, I've got some girls with some age on them up here.
Yeah.
And she's going to need a little refinement, as my mother would say, as time goes on. So we're not planning for just today. We are planning. I think it's a very good point to keep in mind. So that 3-point that we talked about initially, that really was about programming and making sure we had people.
That's right.
Buildings, that's probably on top of it. So I think it's a very good piece for us to keep in mind if we're going to project. We don't need to project for just today. We need to project for 10 years.
Okay, so let's go back. I believe we have a motion on the floor. We do have a second. Who made that second? Mr. Udy, thank you. And I think we're ready to vote. So would you please reread the motion again?
A motion to do a study to close GC Holly and convert Greenville Elementary School into a middle school with the consideration of the use of the high school athletic field.
And I want to amend that, he said an architectural study, and I think that's important because that's different than just the general policy study.
Okay, so we've got that motion and second. It's time to vote. If we would vote, please raise your hand. All those in favor of the motion say aye. All those opposed? It is 5-1. Okay, all
Can
right.
you go back through and tell us what we're studying one more time now?
Well, currently, all the studies have been, if I'm not wrong, have now been completed in terms of bringing somebody in to look at the southern end and to give us a set of recommendations. So, if I'm not mistaken, now we're moving to the next phase, which is to determine which schools we really want to focus on and how much it's going to cost. The first one that we've done is Creedmoor Elementary and Holly. Now the other one is Holly and renovating that facility on the campus. Do we need a motion to that effect?
It's already
Yes,
done.
motion.
So we
It's
don't
number
need
two.
to do anything else related to, well, wait a minute.
Well,
We need something related to an architectural study.
but it was already asked originally, we just asked standard homes.
The superintendent can hire an architect. I think she just wanted to make sure you were in support. I mean, up to 100,000. right?
As long as it's clear that we've approved looking at the costs of renovating Hawley, then we're fine. Okay?
Do you feel like you?
That's awesome.
Wait, what'd you say?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
There's one other thing we could consider in the short term. When I toured Hawley, the principal indicated that though the infrastructure had some challenges, that the school was still serviceable. We could still use the school. While we're doing these studies, another option would be that we definitely have one excess elementary school. We know that, and we need to shed our excess rooms to try and quit bleeding so much financially. So while the studies are going in progress, is there another opportunity at some point to discuss a temporary Band-Aid on Hawley and shutting down, say, Wilton? With the thought being that we can start saving some money right now, while some of these other discussions are going to be more sophisticated and going to probably be harder to do. And that's kind of a thought to a quick-term solution to try to start stopping some of our operational losses. It's just a thought. I mean, if we're going to renovate Hawley, that's going to be, I mean, if we're going to do it right, that's going to be millions of dollars. In many years. And it is part of your study, I guess what I'm asking is there some, and I hate to go cheap on things, but is there some easier way to fix the essential elements of Hawley and try and keep Hawley viable for a few more years as we see what happens with the growth or not? If you're right, if these developments that Mr. Mims has mentioned and others do happen, then we may be, wishing we hadn't shut schools down 10 years from now. But by the same token, we cannot financially afford to be at 56% capacity. We cannot do it. So I'm just tossing out an idea here of the quickest thing we need to do is get rid of a Southern Elementary School. That needs to happen soon. And it's just a way that we could without shortchanging the students, do some sort of Band-Aid on Hawley, to at least buy us 3 or 4 more years. I don't want to throw good money after bad, I'm just tossing out, and I think we can make some money on Wilton. I think that was what the thought is, to kind of get us to see what's going to happen with our population. If the projections are true, and we go down to 6,700 some students in our district, we're going to get rid of a lot more schools. If that doesn't pan out, if the growth in Creedmoor does increase, then we don't want to make a hasty decision. We got to do something. This is just a,
Well,
Pie in the sky.
we're trying to move forward with this. That may be a motion you want to make, but right now, it is clear that the board has approved looking at the cost to renovate GC Hall. And so the next step, that's already been approved, so that we now need to decide what's the next step.
could I then make a motion that we, along with the study to renovate Hawley, we look at what it might cost to, say, give Hawley a 5-year lease on life? Rather than a full renovation where we got the main building and the other wing and bring in the mobile units and all that, is it even feasible? And maybe the architects could say, no, you're just throwing good money after bad, this thing is so far gone, you gotta just tear it down. Or they may say, yes, you can do this for $400,000 and you'll get 5 more years. I don't know. Is that,
But we've just talked about what needs to happen at Hall. And the oldest building there, if you renovate it, it's gotta go. And you're talking about putting a Band-Aid on it.
exactly right. I'm talking about something to get us through a couple
Wait a
years.
minute.
And I don't understand why you want to put a Band-Aid on something that we know doing the renovation has to be torn down. I mean, I don't understand that. I mean, why are you going there?
Yes, sir?
I'm going there because we're asking the county commissioners for $2 million that we may not get. If we don't get that money, we're gonna have to cut stuff. Next year, it's gonna be worse, because we're bleeding 1.7 million a year by having empty classrooms.
I understand all that.
So that's what I'm saying, a quicker way to move forward might be to close the Southern
What I'm
Elementary
saying is
School.
putting a Band-Aid on this school is not going to help us down the road.
No, sir, it won't. It will only help us get us to the next few years until we see if our numbers in fact continue to decline. In which case, then the decision's easy. We can probably shut down Hawley and convert a high school to a middle school. If our numbers don't go down, if our numbers start to increase, we may not be able to. We may have to put the money in Hawley. We may have to find that money somehow. I'm just saying, as part of the study, I'm not saying.
I'm just not appreciative of you putting the cart before the horse here. I just don't appreciate it.
All right, so we already have the renovation, GC Hall. The question is, do you need to be authorized to get architectural services for that renovation information?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so do I have a motion to that effect?
You already have it.
To architectural,
Wasn't it in the
I
original
thought
motion?
that was.
Yeah, we already, Mr. Casey's already made it.
well, I'm so far behind. I don't know
I
what's-
thought it was
what
the
day it is.
original, and then when he come back with the calls, we told him to stop it, so we got this high level thing.
Okay, so we're all
So
set.
now we're just kind of telling him, okay,
All
play
right,
again.
so we don't need a motion, we're all set. Okay. Now, do you have a motion that you would like to make, Mr. Rivers, about? any-
Well, my motion was really just a modification to include in the study for Hawley. If it is feasible, and I appreciate Mr. Peace's comments, I'm just asking, is that feasible and is there any value? If the rest of the board doesn't agree, that's fine, it's not gonna hurt my feelings. Is there any value in doing something that would allow us to make a decision on an elementary school and be able to keep the status quo for a couple more years to see how the numbers work out? I appreciate what Dr. McLean said. If the numbers don't go as a projection, we could be in a tight spot. That's all I was asking. Is it worthwhile to see, is there some temporary fix that would not be too costly, that would get us through the next several years as we sort out where our numbers go? That was it. It would just be part of the study.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. The question that I have is, we went through an element of this process before with Mary Potter. And when we got an estimate about the conversion of Mary Potter, the board was somewhat taken aback with the range from the 4 million to 12 million. My concern is if, based on what the board has approved, if we look at Creedmoor Elementary conversion and/or Harley renovation, and those figures come back prohibitive, then what?
Well,
And that's sort of where I was going.
the bottom line is that whatever it's going to cost, the board makes a decision about what's best and takes it to the county commissioners and see what happens. I don't think we have any clue. I'm sure it's gonna be expensive, probably more than some of us even think, but I don't think we have a clue as to the cost. But the bottom line is, something needs to be done as a part of our overall discussions about dealing with schools. And this needs to be addressed in some way, shape, or form. We need to know as we move forward. That does not preclude closing Wilton, period, whatever, but the thing we have said all along is that we would do the studies and whatever we decided would not go into effect until the 2021 school year. My concern about doing anything at this last minute is, number one, we would have to conduct a formal study. If we were to close an individual school, we would have to conduct a formal study. How long would that take? It's May. If the study comes back in June, how do you close a school in June and redistrict all those kids? And the bottom, well, that's the reality of what we face. If we were doing this 2 months earlier, it might be different, but.
I think one of the problems we keep running into is we've probably spent 3 or 4 months now discussing what we're even going to study, and we won't let them study.
Right.
And so then we're so far back behind what they originally wanted us to project of bringing a recommendation that, we've got to get something off the ground to do something, or
Right.
we're just going to keep sitting here talking about the same studies.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to, we got this motion, we approved this, now we've got that one, and so you've got direction, and is there any other motion that anybody wants to offer?
I don't have a motion, but I do have a question. I've heard Wilton mentioned several times, but I don't see it anywhere. Is that off the board, on the board?
There's
What's the
never been a
status?
motion to study for.
Right, there's been no motion, but it is the final statement in item number 2. You all talked about selling a southern area school. So if we could get some direction, because we know you don't want us to study all the southern area schools, elementary schools, the expert has narrowed the list for us, and it's a matter of us studying what you'd like, or have the architecturals on whichever schools you select. So this could be where you tell us exactly which ones you want.
Well, we've taken care of the two things. Do we want to do a motion to study Wilton? And if so, is there a motion or is there a better option? Evidently there is not. Let's move forward. Is that it? All right. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Julie.
Okay. Is that it? That's it. All right, do I have a motion to, we're going to take a 10-minute break. And after that, we will go into executive, closed session. Is there a motion to go into closed session? And would you read what it would be for?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn to closed session in accordance with North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A6, 143-318-11A3, 143-318-11A5, and Section 115C 321 personnel and attorney-client privilege.
All right. We have a motion, is there a second?
No.
Second.
We have a second, all those in favor say aye. 10-minute break. David, you're gonna slow us.
It's on.
It's on. All right, may I have a motion to approve personnel classified and certified as presented? Mr. Richardson, second Mr. Peaks. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. All right. Anything else we need to approve? I don't know, second, just to be sure. All right, we're now back in the area where we have discussion on various things. Mr. Mims sent us a memo asking to have 3 items placed on the agenda to discuss. We can do this, but we can also refer to the next meeting because of the time. I would prefer that we postpone it until the next meeting. It really isn't on the agenda, so it doesn't take a vote, but it's 10:30 at night, and, you know, I think enough's enough. Heather, you may feel different. Comments?
Well, I think we certainly need to have some discussion about 1720 before we go forward, because we don't know
Before we leave tonight?
between now and the next time we get back,
Yeah.
1720 might need to be,
That's fair.
I mean, we can have, I can look at my email as far as a number of things, but the length of the agenda obviously can be cut down. I mean, and I'll defer that. But 1720, I think we need to have a session on that. And let me just give you a for instance. I would think if there is an incident of 1720 and board members are going to be contacted, the legal counsel needs to be the one to contact the board members. And in doing so, remind board members exactly what the parameters are. When...
Don't worry, Mr. Mims,
No.
I will never call again.
Okay, Dr. Luhan, but the point is,
I won't be chair.
the point is, our legal representative represents the board, not just the superintendent or not just the chair. So if there's something that needs to be shared with the board that is germane to 1720, it should come from the legal representative.
And that's your opinion.
That's, well,
Yes,
you
it's your
can-
opinion, Ed.
That is my opinion. However, failure to do that can basically subject this board to potential
And
ramifications.
you check that out with the lawyer.
Now, are you questioning my opinion?
Oh, no, you can.
Is that
we all
your
have-
opinion?
We all have opinions. All right, we're not getting anywhere. Sorry, that's my fault. I shouldn't have gone off like that.
Well, I mean, you're entitled to do that, but that's why I sent the email, because I think, as was stated, there are a number of missteps that took place. And in order to avoid those in the future, we can rectify the policy. If we're not going to follow policy, let's get rid of policy.
All right?
Can I just interject something?
Sure.
I think, based on the procedure that was followed, I would like to know at some point what the missteps were, and how they relate to what they should have been. I mean, if you're saying policy says this, then a misstep was that, then fill me in. I mean, I would like, and that's not something I need to know tonight, but you know what I'm saying?
Oh, I can tell you tonight.
Well, I don't
What you want to hear,
want
but.
I would like to get out of here. That's what I'd like to do tonight.
Well, we'll come back and have a conversation at the appropriate time. Okay, anything else? Granville Ed Foundation stands. What did I miss?
Will we add those 3 items to our next agenda?
Okay, that's good. Just a reminder, we do have training on the 9th at around 3 o'clock, and we're going to do that at Northern Granville Middle School
Yes.
in the,
There's a professional development group. Is that 119?
319.
319. So if you
evaluating
come-
her evaluation. And that's
Yes.
3 o'clock,
Have
roughly.
they told you who's gonna do it?
Pat
Yes.
Ashley.
Pat Ashley?
Yeah, we talked and we're all set. And
It's
the-
3 o'clock, you say, you said
Yeah.
roughly, but it's 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock, and we'll be in there roughly 2 to 3 hours.
Northern Granville.
Yes.
I know, okay. All right, anything else?
Mr. Chairman.
Motion to adjourn.
Will you indulge me for one moment? I would just like to thank you all for renewing my contract tonight. I appreciate the trust and confidence you have in me, and I look forward to working with you guys for the next 4 years. So, thank you very much.
Did we
Thank you, Dr.
approve his contract?
He was in there, Dr.
Or was it,
Houlihan.
doggone?
Did we do that?
Yeah, we did it.
Who's at a lower salary? Who's at a lower salary?
At a lower salary.
I didn't tell him all that, Mr.
Thank you. Okay.
I do have one thing to add. This Thursday, Work Key Celebration, that will be at Northern Granville if you could get there. And don't forget, next week on the 17th, we have our first graduation, Granville Early College
Yeah.
at 7 p.m.
That over at Vance Granville.
Yes, sir, in the Civic Center. So if you could get there no later than 6:30, I'd really appreciate it.
Can you tell us where and what Granville Academy graduation will look like, because it was added on there?
Absolutely. Dr. Leonard?
Yes, it will be at 4,
Yes.
and I believe that we're going to have it at Granville Center. I just need to verify the location with Dr. Rand. We talked about a
Several
couple.
up in the air,
Mhm.
because there's
We talked
so
about a
few
couple-
students.
Couple of places, so I think that's what we're going to do.
But I went ahead and put all of those at the bottom of your agenda, so if you'll please add them, as many of us as possible, if we could get there. And we will be wearing the robes, no hats, but we will be wearing the robes. And we will start them on time, and then once again, no longer than an hour.
Okay, very good. All right.
End of year board and retreat. This is the
Wait,
last
get
one,
out
I
of
promise. June 14th, we will be putting the metrics to that strategic plan for next school year, the next 5 to 10 years. So we'd love to have you at the Expo Center, 10:30 to 2:30. 10:30 to 2:30, and that's at the back of your agenda, but the time is wrong, is why we're bringing your attention.
Did you say it's a board retreat?
We're going to be doing end-of-year retreat. That is with our district staff, cabinet,
Okay.
Oh, your
and
staff.
board, because we're putting metrics there, so we need you. We need you.
Okay.
You're gonna have to know this,
Yes, we will.
Okay, anything else?
What do we do with the GEM, the town?
GEM, I sort of alluded to it in my remarks at the beginning, but we just talked with them briefly today about upcoming events and thanked them for what they did Friday night in celebration, and they were grateful.
Okey-doke. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
You have a motion? You got a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, see you Thursday, gang.
Hey.